Good morning and welcome to Norcal PTAC's webinar in partnership with Norcal VBOC. This is the webinar on certifications for veteran-owned businesses. I'm really happy to have everyone here today. My name is James Forrest. I'm the program coordinator for Norcal PTAC. Our main presentation is given by one of our procurement specialists, Joseph or Joe Moore. He is also with Norcal PTAC, as I mentioned. Noah Harris is also joining us today. He'll be talking in the beginning about Norcal VBOC, that's the Veteran Business Outreach Center. They are wonderful partners of ours located down in the Bay Area, and it's hard to beat Noah's level of enthusiasm for helping his clients. So we're really excited to have this partnership and to be getting the word out to help veteran businesses, and that's why we're here today. We do all of this for the benefit of our clients. We are a grant-funded nonprofit center, part of a network of centers across the country, each independently owned and independently operated, or not owned. We provide all of our services to our clients for free. So you didn't pay anything to join today's webinar, and you wouldn't pay anything if you'd like to become a client of ours either. Here is our service area map on the right. These are the 15 counties in Northern California we cover. And what I mean is that you're eligible for client services if you're in this area. So many of you, there was someone from Michigan, there's someone from Maryland, there's folks from around. You could totally join these webinars. You can ask us questions and participate in these webinars. That's totally fine. If you'd like to become a client of ours, you should have a business that's established, that's located in this service area, and you should be interested in government contracting. So not loans, not startup assistance. Noah with the VBOC might be able to help you with some of those things, or your local SBDC. But Norcal PTAC, we're for government contracting. So specifically contracting topics, it's the Northern California Procurement Technical Assistance Center. It's quite a mouthful. If you are a client of ours, we can help you in a number of ways. We can help you with one-on-one counseling. So we have procurement specialists such as Joe Moore today. He is one of our excellent counselors. If you apply, we can connect you with them for an ongoing relationship of one-on-one counseling sessions. So you can meet via phone, video conferencing, exchange emails, and they can go over the processes of selling your goods and services to government. So it's really a cradle to grave. We can go from how to get your business certifications, how to get registered in SAM, how to get your cage code, how to do marketplace research, how to review solicitations, how to put together a proposal packet, and how to stay compliant once you win. We can also set you up with a custom bid matching profile. This is pretty neat. Basically what it does is it scours the internet and finds all the different opportunities that may be available to you, whether it's city, state, county, tribal, federal, you name it, different levels of government. It will gather all sorts of information, send it to your inbox, and then you can click on these requests for proposals, requests for quotations, and it brings you right to the solicitation, and you can put together your packet and submit. So it's a great tool for market research, and that's something we pay for and offer to you for free. And then, as you already know, the third option here is resources and trainings. You know this because you're joining our webinar today. So of our clients who we've helped out, we've helped them win more than $500 million in government contracts in 2020 alone. I'm just processing the numbers for this year, and since September, we've helped our clients win about $500 million as well. So we're set to blow that number out of the water this year, and we're really excited to be able to put these dollars, these tax dollars, government contracting dollars, or your tax dollars going back into small business pockets, and that's what we're all about. If you're not in our service area, in Norcal PTAC service area here, you can apply for your own local PTAC. There's about 97 PTACs well, there was one last time I looked it up across the whole country, so chances are you're in the service area of another PTAC. So click on the second link. Everyone will be getting the slides and the email later today, a video recording as well as the slides. And of course, if you're in our service area, go ahead and click on norcalptac.org there, and we will be happy to review your application. If you have any questions, my information is on the bottom. I'm going to introduce Noah Harris with the Norcal VBOC, the Veteran Business Outreach Center program, who is going to talk a little bit about what they can do for you as well. Really amazing partners here. So thanks Noah.
Excellent. Thank you, James. I definitely appreciate being here. Good morning, participants. As James mentioned, we are one of the SBA resource partners along with the PTACs. The Veterans Business Outreach Center program, similar to the PTACs, is nationwide. It's not new. And as James mentioned, we are your tax dollars, our tax dollars, I should say, at work. And essentially, we are a program that's focused on working with veterans who are interested in starting businesses or who have businesses and expanding those. One of our primary programs is for transitioning service members on the installations, as well as roughly quarterly for veterans who've already been out of the military for a while and don't still have access to an installation. We provide a either 1 or 2 day overview intensive business preparatory workshop. It's not designed to turn anyone into an MBA or anything like that, but it is designed to cover the bases that any business is going to need to firmly understand and establish to stay viable. In terms of military, myself, typically VBOCs are run or operated by veterans. I'm a U.S. Army Explosive Ordnance Disposal, or EOD, veteran myself. That was my kind of first job in life. Done a lot of other things since then, including not only in the past being a part of the Small Business Development Center network that James mentioned earlier, but also with nonprofit lending organization that was focused on veteran small business. So as the slide says, beyond the Boots to Business program, your local veteran business outreach centers can really help you, whether you're looking at exploring the feasibility of a different business idea or if you're already a going concern. Essentially, I like to describe myself and VBOCs as pathfinders. You as the veteran, you're the commander, and our mission is to work with you, get clarity on what is the mission as you define it for this business that ultimately is going to serve a larger purpose for the owner and his or her family members ostensibly, and help you set that business up for the long term, or if it's already in existence, to help you stay on track. Like in the Army, the old PMCS, we're your preventative maintenance checks and services kind of organization that's designed to, quite frankly, get you and keep you squared away. And if you're already squared away, great. It's all about working to enhance your capability. And so further, as it says, the trainings and the workshops that we do directly, for the most part, of the Boots to Business, because we have such a robust partnership network with small business development centers, women business centers, SCORE, PTACs. We do our best not to duplicate things or do things that are already covered. But what we do focus on is bringing those veterans' voices to these types of trainings. So if we do a training, say, on financing, the way I like to approach it is, yes, we're going to cover the bases, but we're going to also include the voice or voices of veterans who have recently gotten finance, so that in addition to the content, you get to hear from the been there, done that, this is what I wish I would have known perspectives that typically, in my experience, I know as a veteran, I love hearing from other veterans who've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, so to speak, of what I'm looking to do, so that we can leverage resources, save time, and execute against the mission a lot faster. So at any rate, that being said, that's essentially what the VBOCs are focused on as it relates to today's topic. Whereas and I'm not going to steal any of Joe's thunder, but as this topic is focused on veteran business certifications, the VBOCs can, and I have worked with veterans, helping them to navigate the currently run by the VA process of getting certified. But the whole point is that whether you are working with a VBOC, whether you're working with a PTAC, please, please, please take advantage of, use these resources that quite frankly, we have all paid for and are continuing to pay for. So get your money's worth. I encourage you to ask questions. Before we're all done with this, you'll have all of our contact information. If you're outside of the NorCal VBOC service area, which is from Los Angeles County, Ventura County, and Los Angeles County North. So essentially everything north of Los Angeles, Ventura, and Santa Barbara counties, as is on the screen here. You can find your local VBOC at sba.gov/VBOC. By all means, please contact with them. We're a pretty tight-knit community. We communicate roughly on a bi-weekly basis. So thank you all for your service, your participation, and I look forward to, if you're in our service area, working with you. And even if you're not in our service area, you have a question, feel free to reach out, and I'll do my best to get you connected to your local VBOC.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Noah, and appreciate everything you do for veterans in this state. So thanks everyone for joining. We're going to get the main presentation started, but what you've heard today are 2 free resources that are really great. So if you get nothing else out of this webinar, just know that you have options for folks that are very, very happy to help you out. So this is Joe Moore. He's one of our procurement specialists. Got a lot of experience in the industry. Joe, let's go ahead and turn on your camera.
Okay.
All right, and you've got control of the screen now, Joe, so I won't be clicking around, and take her home. So thanks everyone. This is Joe Moore for the main presentation.
Good morning, my fellow veterans. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your service. This is going to be an informative seminar, webinar on one phase of federal government contracts. I want to add a few different additional nuggets to my background that you see here, just for information purposes. I enlisted in the Navy in 1964 under a delay entry program. I was commissioned in 1976 as a Mustang officer. Okay, I know that you added to your time in the military, and I hope that someday we can have an opportunity to some of your that you have added to your time in the military. There we go. Okay. Here's the disclosure statement. This information is accurate as I can present it as it is of today. The approach I'm taking on this presentation is not to read each slide to you, but to add specific points of concern. I do have a tendency to speak in acronyms. So if I try to go back, I will try and go back and tell you what that means in English. James already talking to you about the questions and the presentation being provided to you. What is contracting? Well, from my years of experience in this field, I say contracting is an entire process that is a combination of fixed procedures and processes, along with flexibility to make an adjustment and move on. It can at times be overwhelming, but in the long run, it does allow for a sense of pride and accomplishment to kick in. Just as a sidebar note, the current Secretary of the Navy, Honorable Carlos del Toro, was a small business owner prior to his appointment by President Biden to the Secretary of the Navy. Couple steps I want to talk about, just general information about contracting. This is not on a slide, but first of all is getting your business registered and develop a capability statement. Basically, this is where this webinar falls into place. Next phase in government contracting would be learn all you can about the contracting process. Ask questions and ask for help. That's what the PTAPs do. Apply what you've learned by taking a solicitation and creating your own proposal package for review by your peers to see if you've covered the right information. And then after that, jump out into the water and create your own response to a solicitation. If you don't win, request a debrief. Find out why you did not win. If you do win, then you have to perform that contract in accordance with the terms and conditions in the contract document. Purpose of this VA programs is right here. We want to make sure that veterans have the opportunity to get advantages in contracts, both federal and state of California. These are going to be the objectives we're going to be talking about today. Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise for California, and Service Disabled and Veteran-Owned Small Business certifications for the federal government. Okay, California requires that a veteran to be from the U.S. military, naval, or air service. It does not include individuals who are serving under the public health service in the uniform service of public health service. Veteran has to have at least a 10% disability rating. And the veteran must be a resident in California to be certified by California. The other requirements are the veteran owning that business must have 51% owned by one or more disabled veterans. If it's a limited liability company, it must be wholly owned by one or more disabled veterans. And the daily business operations must be managed and controlled by one or more disabled veterans. If you have a partnership of 50-50 between two service disabled veterans, that is possible. But if you have a 50-50 business relationship partnership between a veteran and non-veteran, that's not going to fly. Now, this is the page from the Cal eProcure homepage. This is where you go to register your business to do business with the state of California. So in the home page of that, you would go to the top left to register your company. And over on the top right, you would see this page for your certification for small business and disabled veteran business enterprise. Down at the bottom of the page in the two blue areas, you have the additional requirements that have to be met for each of the programs to where you submit your documents. Okay, these are some of the additional documents that are required from the disabled veteran application. IRS documentation, award letter from each disabled veteran who are owners of the company that certifies a service-connected disability rating of at least 10%. And federal income taxes for the 3 years of the business for any partners and each disabled veteran equipment owner. And I'll talk about that equipment owner momentarily. Resumes. Okay. The resume is to show that you have experience in the area in which you're conducting your business. You cannot have a title of a medical doctor without being able to show that you are a practicing physician. So it's just, that's where they want to see the experience, the knowledge, and the relationship from your resume to your business operation. Additional documents that may be required: business license or seller's permit. This one for the DVBE equipment rental. If you're renting equipment to the state, you have to be able to show that you have 51% of ownership of all that equipment that is rented to the state. This does not apply if it's your own equipment you're renting for your own personal business operations. Again, another reminder here, if you're an LLC, it must be wholly owned by one or more disabled veterans. And you can see the additional documents in this slide that are required. Again, Additional documents may be requested, and do not send documents unless they are requested. Okay, the small business and the disabled veteran business enterprise certification applications can be submitted simultaneously through eCal Procure. The small business certification is usually completed in a very short time frame. I've seen it to where it's been completed and approved within 10 minutes of time of submission. Disabled veteran business enterprise process usually takes about 30 days for approval. If you want to request an expedited application process, provide a copy of the solicitation with the agency name, the point of contact name at the agency, and the bid due date. And they will try to accommodate you to get you certification before the proposal due date. Okay, the state of California has a goal for 3% of contracting dollars. Okay, for for disabled veteran business enterprise firms. There may be a 5% incentive on some contracts. This 5% advantage is spelled out in the guidance under the State of California Procurement Organization as to how it processes. But what it does, it takes your bid and applies a percent to that highest bid. And if you come in lower than that highest bid, then you may be eligible for a contract. The other one is bid options. That is where two certified disabled veteran business enterprises or small business firms submit price quotes. There is no formal opportunity announcement. And the benefit is that this can be awarded for full value of the contract with no subcontracting commitment. And there is no allowance allowed for any protest. And this helps the agency meet its annual contracting goals for small business or disadvantaged business enterprises. The reciprocity partners is listed at that link. If you open up that link, you will find out the different agencies that are accepting the disadvantaged business enterprise certification in addition to the main agencies of the state. University of California Procurement was a recent addition. Now we're going to jump over to the federal side. Okay, these are some changes that have taken place in the federal side recently or will be taking place. First of all, the verification process, as it is right now with the Centers for Veterans Enterprise, is being moved over to the SBA as of 1 January 2023. This will become a formal certification and not a verification. State of California is a certification. Right now, the federal government is a verification, but 1 January 2023, it will become a certification with the SBA doing the certifications. Currently, the SBA does certifications for other federal social economic programs, 8A program, Hub Zone program, woman-owned small business, and economically disadvantaged small business. So the thought process here with the government was to put all the certifications by under one agency that is doing the reviews. So that's why it's moving over to the SBA on 1 January 2023. If you're not aware of it, or if you have a SAM registration or you do not have a SAM registration, If you do not have one, you don't need to request a Dun and Bradstreet number now. The unique entity ID number became effective on 1 April of this year. This replaced the DUNS number. So if you're currently registered in SAM, you're automatically given a UEI number. If you make changes to the registration in SAM, going forward, specific backup documents will be required. And there's a list of required documents for what type of change you're processing with the SAM system. The additional change that's come into place here is the size standard. The SBA conducts the size standard calculations either in dollars or number of employees. The program recently went from 3 years to 5 years for receipt calculations. So now the Center for Veterans Enterprise and then the SBA are requiring new or renewing applicants for the federal government certification verification right now to submit 5 years of business tax returns. Payroll taxes is still 2 years. Okay. To be qualified as a service disabled veteran or veteran-owned small business for the federal government, you must meet these 3 categories: eligibility, ownership, and control. Additionally, there's some other smaller categories that are interrelated to these major categories. There is a pre-qualification quiz at this web address. It's not mandatory you take the quiz, but it's a good idea because it gives you as a business owner upfront some ideas as to where your application could potentially be rejected because you don't have the right information. So I recommend to all the veterans who are trying to get the certification, go ahead and take that pre-qualification quiz because that gives you a starting point to see what you need to pull together that you do not have. Okay, your primary NAICS code, you must be a small business. Again, the SBA creates a standard for what is a small business. It's either a number of employees or revenue on a 5-year basis. For example, if your size standard is by revenue, let's say you have a size standard of 21.5 million. Excuse me for 1 second. As long as you stay under 21.5 million and a 5-year rolling average, you're still a small business. Once you go over that number, you're a large business. So you're not eligible for the small business programs. But you can view our previous webinar here for how to find NAICS codes. And you must have one identified NAICS code to complete a SAM registration. Ownership. Ownership must be 51% minimum, unconditional, and direct ownership by one or more service disabled veteran-owned small businesses. Unconditional means no restrictions on the ability to acquire or dispose of the shares of the company. Direct ownership cannot be obtained through a holding company or a trust. If your company is a franchise where restrictions are put in place by the parent company, such as the ability to have full control of the business, where a specific corporate procedure has to be followed, you would not be granted a service disabled veteran-owned certification. The veteran applicant must have full control of the day-to-day operations and responsibility for all management decisions and the highest level officer in the company and in compensation. Okay, you've got to be the top with full responsibility. Excuse me, I had to stop and cough. The application submission is the first phase. The intake review is the second. Assessment review is third, and then decision normally within 60 days is the fourth area. The application submission is through the Center for Veterans Enterprise website and portal. It also requires the completion of each veteran owner to sign the VA form 0877. If you have multiple veterans in that business ownership, they all have to submit the same paperwork. Okay, if you have something that is discovered during the intake review that you did not address from the required documents to be submitted, that can be explained by what's called a letter of exception, telling the VA reviewers why you don't have that specific requirement. For example, it asks for payroll documents. If you have no employees, your letter of exception would be, I have no payroll documents to submit because I have no employees. Excuse me again, my sinuses are really giving me a fit today. If you receive, prior to the decision process, if you receive a final post-review finding, as they call a PRF notice, you must comply with the due date that's on that letter for submission of the requested information. If you cannot make that due date, you may request a voluntary withdrawal and submit the requested information at a later date. If you do not request a voluntary withdrawal, the decision package is reviewed, and more than likely you're going to be denied access to certification or verification as a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Once the denial letter is issued, you are not eligible to reapply for 6 months. Denial applications do have a right of appeal, provided that request is submitted within 10 days of receipt of the original denial letter. Excuse me again, I'm sorry. The federal government has a mandatory 3% of all procurement dollars to be awarded to service-disabled veteran-owned firms. There is no mandatory award amount for veteran-owned small businesses. Veterans Administration can give preference in most cases to service-disabled veteran or veteran-owned small businesses for contract awards. And you can find your small business liaison at this address for the VA. Other federal agencies may recognize the verification of service-disabled veterans and can create a set-aside for those categories. Okay. PTAP assistance. Feel free to reach out to PTAP and get the assistance you need, and both in a review of your veteran application or other issues related to federal government contracts. The verification, once it's approved by the Center for Veterans Enterprise Office, your verification is approved for 3 years. At that time, you will receive an electronic logo that you can use on your letterhead, business cards, and other marketing materials, so everybody knows that you are certified. Okay, I think that's the end of my presentation. I'm ready now for questions.
All right, before we go into questions, let me go ahead and take the control screen here. Just want to talk about some of the upcoming events we have. We do have plenty of time for questions. So it's 10:39 right now. We have until 11 booked. So if you guys have any questions for Noah, for Joe, or for me as the program coordinator for PTAC, please put them in the Q&A tab now, and we'll get to them as time permits. And if you can, try to keep them relevant for everyone in the presentation today. So it's a nice balance between not being too detailed and specific, but being general enough it's helpful for everyone. Okay, but we do have some events coming up I want to talk about. We have woman-owned small business certification overview. So if anyone's a veteran and a woman, you can get both of those certifications. That is a federal certification. It's going to be on Thursday, May 5th at 10 a.m. We have an introduction webinar called How to Do Business with the Government. This is part of a series of webinars that we do Thursday, May 12th, 10 a.m. And then we've got a two-part series here that we do quarterly with the California Department of General Services Office of Small Business Development, and they have they're putting on with us a How to Do Business with the State of California webinar and a Contracting with California I'm Certified Now What webinar. That's on Tuesday and Thursday, May 24th, 26th, both at 10 a.m. These are all free and free to join from anywhere, wherever you are. So if you'd like to find out more about our events, click on that link when you get these slides, or just go to our website at norcalptac.org and click around. Lots of good resources there. As Joe mentioned, we are here to help, and to prove that, we will have a Q&A now. So I see some questions going into the chat. I can answer those, but it's better if you put them into the Q&A. It's a little easier to get to them. So first, I've got a question from John McComb. I'm going to editorialize a little bit here. And the question is, other than usaspending.gov, so to back up, John's having some trouble finding specific details about contracts that have been granted already. So I believe this is a question for Joe. Other than usaspending.gov, sam.gov, and Freedom of Information requests, are there any other tools you would recommend or resources to gain visibility on subcontracts?
Well, John, I would start with the FPDS, Federal Procurement Data System, FPDS, Next Gen. You can start there and look for prime contractors under your NAICS code. Then you can work down and find out what contracts they have. And then finding subcontracting opportunities is not easy, because that information is only reflected in the performance rating systems from the prime. But using the FPDS, you can work down through the a potential prime contractor. You can find out the contract they have, and then you can go and look up that solicitation, and then find out potentially by making contact with the company what subcontracting opportunities they may have, by sending them an email with your capability statement.
Great. Thanks, Joe, for your answer. Rick has a question here. When providing supporting documents to get certification, 3 years of tax returns are required. Specifically, what part of the tax return should be submitted?
It's the section of the tax return that shows if your business income is in your personal return, it's that section of business income. If you're filing a separate business tax return, then it's that full tax return for the business.
Probably might be indicated in the application for certification, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Okay, Joseph Cresselia is asking, when I go onto the federal side to see what benefits and advantages I have as a service-connected disabled business, where can I go to see what benefits, advantages I have as a service-disabled business? Further, how do I know what benefits an agency enjoys by choosing to do business with service-disabled business?
Well, are we talking about individual benefits or just a business itself?
I think he means what sort of advantages a business might have as an SDVOSB or DVBE.
Well, the benefit is that 3% of the federal contracting dollars go to service disabled veterans. That's in law right now, and there's provision there's legislation pending, I believe, right now where they're trying to raise that percentage to 5%. That is the advantage of being a service disabled veteran firm that's certified. Again, other federal agencies other than VA recognize this. It's only required right now if you're doing business with the Veterans Administration. But if you have the certification, the other federal agencies and departments can recognize you as a service disabled veteran, and they can make that solicitation they're putting out based on your response to a source of sought. They can make that solicitation a set aside for a veteran-owned small business or a service disabled veteran-owned small business based on the responses they receive from that source of sought.
Great. I also put in the chat a link to the SBA site that has some details on the SDVOSB, and halfway down you can see program benefits along with eligibility requirements following. So hopefully that's helpful to folks. Joseph says thank you. Thanks, Joseph, for your good question. Rosa Moreno is asking, hi, Joe, where did you obtain your procurement certification? And do you have any recommendations on tips? I got my master's degree in DEC and we'll have time to start the certification. I guess that's...
I think you're talking about my CPCM certification. That's granted through the NCMA, National Contract Management Association. That was a brutal exam that I took a number of years ago, and I've made sure I've kept up my post examination learning so I can keep my certification. If you're talking about the CVE certification as a verification counselor for the VA, the Center of Veterans Enterprise would be the place you would go there and inquire about how you can become a verification counselor.
All right, great. This is a question I can answer from James Style. James is asking, to work with California must we register with all PTAC by regions? I'm not sure I understand that question, but I can explain how working with PTACs work. Basically, wherever your headquarters is, your main business office, where you're registered, you do your primary of work, that is where your PTAC, that's your PTAC location. So if you are in Contra Costa County, your PTAC is us. It's going to be Norcal PTAC. If you have 5 different locations, but your headquarters in Sacramento County, then you're going to work with the California Capital PTAC. Doesn't matter how many locations or where you want to do business. If you're trying to do business with Texas Community School Boards, but your location is in Los Angeles, you're going to work with the LA County PTAC. So every business should have one PTAC based on their primary location. You certainly don't have to work with PTAC to do any business for anything. We are we're basically a free consultancy firm. We help we help you do business with anybody, but we don't provide any certifications or anything like that that you'll need to do business with anybody. We are very nice to have, but not need to have. So thanks for that question, James. If you have any clarifications, you can go ahead and resubmit. Okay. All right, Maurice is appreciating that I gave a shout out to Contra Costa. Contra Costa, woohoo! John McComb is asking, once you've registered in SAM as a SB or a VOSB, what forces you to update your category when your size standard is changed to a large business? So many SBs exceed standards or have been bought out by large companies and have yet to update their category, thus allowing them to still go after SB opportunities.
That question is directed and the answer is performed by the SBA when they go out and do the re-verification analysis of these companies. But with the, if you are a service disabled veteran-owned small business for the federal government, you are required by having received that certification to provide any written notification of any change of ownership or size standard to the VA. And if you don't respond to it that way, then VA finds out about it. If VA finds out about it, then they will take your certification away.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Bobby Meadows is asking if I'm getting service disability. This isn't a procurement question. Maybe Noah can answer this question, or maybe we could skip it. I'll go ahead and ask if I'm getting service disability checks from the government, is there a limit on how much money my business can make?
This question has come up before, and it's a very legitimate question. It's a good question. And I actually checked with the SBA itself to get some clarification on it. Essentially, if there are established income limits related to one's benefits, essentially, it's not so much that there's a de facto limit on how much money a person can make, but essentially, if a person gets certified and they're generating sufficient revenue that they're no longer within the, let's just generically say, the framework for that rating, it was described to me as a quote unquote good problem to have. That may not be what we might expect, but essentially the idea, generally speaking, the idea with business and revenues is that you want to maximize those. So I could see where obviously every individual situation is going to be unique and different, and he or she is going to need to make decisions that make the most sense. But if you think about it, it can be really challenging to attempt to operate a business and then not exceed certain amounts of revenue. So what I would encourage you to do, Michael, feel free to check in with me post webinar offline, and we can explore your specific situation and see what makes sense, how we can best get you supported with what you are specifically working with, if that works for you.
All right, thanks, Noah. Michael Daly is asking, do DVBE or SDVOSBs only apply to businesses that have been in business for 3 years, or can startups apply too? Joe?
Can you repeat the question, please, James? You had a break. You broke up for a second.
Can startups apply for the DVBE or the SDVOSB program, or do you need to be in business for 3 years?
I'm not aware of any time restriction for a business for the applying for the certification. Okay, because
either of them,
for either one of them, the only one I'm aware of of a time restriction is applying for the 8A program, where you have to have 3 years of revenue and you have to be able to show you've had contracts to apply for the 8A program. But for the service disabled veteran or the veteran-owned small business, I'm not aware of any time restrictions for time in business.
Okay, great. Tony Parker's asking if we cover Sacramento. No, as I mentioned, the California Capitol covers Sacramento. I can send you a link. I'll drop a couple links in the chat. One will be a link to our website with our service area, and the other will be to AppTAC, which has all of the different PTACs across the country. So that's that. Thanks, Tony, for the good question. Joseph Crisali is asking, are there let me start again. Are there certain federal agencies other than the VA that prioritize working with veteran businesses? If so, is there a listing?
I'm not aware of any agency prioritizing. They all have goals. Each of the federal agencies have the goal of 3% of their total contract dollars have to go to service disabled veterans. But I'm aware of any agency prioritizing it. I mean, again, DOD is the biggest agency and they are meeting their goal. But as far as a listing of who's making it, you might be able to pull that information down from the FPDS website, FPDS in Next Generation.
Okay, great. Michael White is asking, my business is an LLC and I'm a disabled veteran. You said if you have a partner, they must be a veteran as well. Can my wife be my partner if she is not a vet?
No, not for the state of California. Now, under the federal government, she could be, but you still have to have 51% of ownership and day-to-day control of the business under the federal side of the house.
So for California certification, it needs to be wholly owned.
Wholly owned by a service disabled veteran as an LLC.
Okay, and so for federal, it's 51%.
It's 51%, but it's 51% also for California. But it has to but they have a separate add-on in there for LLCs that it has to be wholly owned by a disabled veteran for the state of California.
Okay, so it's specific to LLC. Okay. Great. All right. Thanks, everyone, for excellent questions. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. We had a nice session here. Thanks, everyone, for maximizing. If I don't see anything here, I'll just go ahead and just thank everyone.
Hang on, James. I'd like to make one more additional comment.
Sure.
Back to contracts. Again, as you grow in this area of contracts, both federal and state, learn what you can and ask questions. It's a learning process. It's a continuous learning process. And I do thank you for putting up with my coughing today. All of a sudden, my sinuses have kicked in today, and I'm not physically located in where James is. I'm physically located in Williamsburg, Virginia, working remote for Norcal. So the stuff at the spring has hit here pretty heavy.
We've had quite a bit of pollen in the air here as well. So yeah. I've been feeling it too. It's been pretty
I do appreciate you putting up with me. And again, reach out to your PTAP organization, or you reach out to me if you need to for more assistance. I'm located, my information is located in the Center for Veterans Enterprise list of verification counselors.
Okay, and if you'd like to work with Joe, you can apply for Norcal PTAC if you're in a service area, and we can connect you. And so, yeah, the main takeaway is that there are a lot of details to these processes, but you have a lot of folks that are willing to help, a lot of organizations that our whole purpose is here to help you out. So it's kind of the theme of today's presentation. So thanks again to Noah for joining and partnering with us for this. Noah, you guys are an excellent resource and appreciate the help with this.
Absolutely glad to do it. And you can, if you have any follow-up questions for me or related to the VBOC, you can reach us at norcalvboc.org. And that's, as James said, we're a resource to you. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And then one last thing, I do want to say this to that question about Are there other organizations? Unless I'm mistaken, and correct me, Joe, if I am, but the whole purpose of the reciprocity program or agreements is that once a person gets certified at the federal level and even at the state level, there are other organizations that will recognize your certification for contract purposes. But bottom line,
Yes, yes.
for clarification, if you need assistance, please, please, please get your money's worth, get our money's worth, our tax dollars at work. If we don't have answers, we can navigate the network as it was and help you find out what to do. So thank you very much. Glad, again, thank you, James. Thank you, Joe. It's always a pleasure to work with you. And I look forward to seeing both of you soon, and all of the participants that wish you the best as you go forward doing what you do.
I amplify the same remarks.
All right, thanks, Joe. I dropped a little link in the chats for a survey. If you just let us know what you thought of today's webinar, you'll also be directed there as you leave, I believe. Everyone's going to get the chat. Everyone's going to get the slides as well as the video recording later today in the email. It's going to go to our website, so you can go ahead and check that out. And you can find all of our past webinars as well. But thanks, everyone, once again for joining today, and we'll see you next time. All right, bye-bye.
Goodbye.